everyone. I'm Julie Andrews, and I'm here at the opening of the Walt Disney World in Florida. Just a few miles away from Cape Kennedy, where men point their space vehicles toward the stars, Walt Disney decided to launch his final dream.
We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to episode 30 of the Retro Disney World Podcast. This episode is titled Primetime Specials, Part 1, where we'll be taking you back to all those wonderful television specials that aired over the years, and we're going to be going through about 4 of them. We've got plenty more to do in the future, but this is part 1. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me, as always, is Mr. JT Cousier. How are you tonight, JT?
Doing good, Todd. How are you?
No, not too bad. Doing pretty well. Mr. Hal Bowers from the Tampa area.
Hello, everybody.
How you doing tonight, Hal?
Doing good.
Excellent. And Mr. Brian P. Miles from that city of brotherly love. How goes it tonight, Brian?
Greetings and salutations from Pennsylvania, where you've got a friend. That was our license plate slogan for about 3 years until it made a George Carlin special. And it says, you've got a friend in Pennsylvania. He says, most of the people in Pennsylvania have lived there their whole life. I hope they have a friend. And the next year, they took the slogan off.
All right, so before we get over to our main topic and listener mail and audio rewind, all that great stuff, we first go into comments and corrections. And last month we talked about Listen to the Land, guys. I thought that was a really great episode, the way that all came together. We talked about the symbiosis and then the attraction Listen to the Land. And I mentioned, too, that I was taking the Behind the Scenes tour after we recorded that. And I did ask to try to get kind of behind the Soarin' Q, and nobody would really let me go back there and see what remains of Food Rocks and such. But we really didn't mention any of the music that was in Listen to the Land. How there's quite a bit of stuff, and I know we also had some people write in about specifically about the score that you now hear, the Land music loop, if you will, in the pavilion. So you did some digging, and you've got some information on that.
Yeah, so actually Brian was the one that talked about how it was weird that he was in there on a rainy day and he heard the song from E.T. Playing. So I looked around and found some playlists online, and then a bunch of people wrote in after that. But Brian and I pretty much determined that someone just sat down and Googled the word flight or like put flight into iTunes and found like every song possible.
Yeah, every instrumental song that they could find. So there are all kinds of non-Disney film score music that's in there. That's
Hook and just a lot of the right stuff. Literally anything that had anything to do with flying.
Air Force
got
One.
shoved in there.
Do we? Is If You Had Wings or Dream Flight played at all?
No.
No,
that's more,
fair. They got,
yeah.
No, that would make sense. Why would we?
Yeah. Why would we do that?
This was either the most brilliant thing they could have done or just the absolute laziest. And we'll leave it up to the listener to decide for themselves which one of those it is.
That's right. And Leela from Chapel Hill, you wrote in with that and mentioned it. So thanks for sending that in. We were doing the same research you did. So thank you much. All right. So let's move on to listener mail. JT running out to the mailbag, getting warm now, and
Yes, easy.
breaking
Very
a
nice
sweat with all the mail coming in.
Yeah. All right. I got a few here. First one is from Disney in Ohio. Hello, friend in Ohio. First off, he wants to know, do you know why there's a window above Casey's Corner on Main Street for a Chinese restaurant? Seems out of place to me. He searched the internet and can't find much of a backstory.
So I have the answer to that. And the answer is if you were able to move back a little bit farther, you would see that the sign for Casey's is actually covering a second window that is below the first one. And underneath it says, Jim Armstrong, vegetable buyer. So Jim Armstrong worked for the Disney Company for 22 years. He was the vice president of their Resort and Food Administration. And his operation there won multiple industry awards. Prior to Disney, he worked for the Hilton Hotels and Restaurant Associates, who is a company that developed fine dining establishments in New York, like the Four Seasons. And he ended up passing away in St. Augustine, Florida in 2014. So there is a reason for that to be there.
Interesting. There's always so much more behind the window than you think. It's not just a name up there. There's always seems to be a backstory, which is really interesting. So thanks, Hal, for digging into that.
Anytime.
All right, next up. Hey, guys, I'm a listener from the first episode. Oh, boy, you've hung in there.
God bless you.
Wow.
Yes. You're doing God's work.
I really enjoy every show you produce, so thank you, Mark. 1980s Epcot Center, that's his favorite era of Walt Disney World, and he has something to share with us. It is the first press of the menu used in the Land Pavilion. I've never seen this. This is before my time. Have you guys ever come across?
We got this email from Mark,
Yeah.
and it answered a burning question from our prior episode, and that is, what is Key West pizza?
Yeah, and we've got it here. So I'm going to read off the ingredients. You guys tell me what you think about this. It's a plain crust topped with ginger spiced shrimp, scallops, mushroom, hearts of palm, Montrachet cheese, which is a goat cheese, and Monterey cheese.
I would like to order myself up one of those pies.
I say we take this down to Garden Grill and see if they can whip it off for us.
Oh, my. Sounds like a McFarkle move right there.
So the price here, a sample, they call it a sample size, was $4.95, and the entree was $8.75. And there's a couple other interesting things on this
Yeah,
menu.
I was going to say, are there a couple others now that you have the menu in front of you?
Yeah. So I remember ordering this one. Now, is the broiled barbecued shrimp it's got the giant Kraft barbecue sauce logo there, and Florida peppers served with fresh pasta. I remember getting that as an appetizer. This next one is kind of disturbing. It just says fresh dolphin. It says grilled fillet. It's not dolphin.
So
Hopefully it's dolphin fish.
Which everyone should know. You know dolphin fish today as mahi mahi.
Right. But it doesn't say fish afterwards. It just says fresh dolphin.
Huh. That's only if you have that crazy gold pass you had. They give you the dolphin. Just...
Oh, the gold key pass.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why all the dolphins disappeared under the living seas and were replaced by manatees eventually.
So one other menu trivia here. Brian, this one's for you. You had the handwich downstairs, right?
Yes.
What do you think they called the sandwiches in the Garden Grill? Or the good turn. This would be the good turn, actually. So
You've stumped me.
they're called landwiches.
Wow, of course, the landwich. I should have known.
And they had a club, a grilled strip steak, and a barbecue pork.
I'd like a grilled strip steak landwich. That sounds delicious. I do want to say this. The feedback we got, pun intended, on the food discussion and the menu discussion from our last episode, I don't think there's anything we've talked about in the last year that got as much feedback from people as we did on the handwiches and the menu items and the food court and all that
a
stuff.
menu episode.
Well, we do, and I think we've got this one now. I have the old Flagler's. We've got a contemporary.
I have a giant collection of them.
Yeah, so we got to bring a food.
It might be a mini episode, folks. I don't think you can spend an hour of us listening to us talk about menus, but
I can spend at least 15 minutes on Space Dogs in Tomorrowland.
yeah.
Blue mayonnaise. The landwich, though.
God, that always starts off a whole thing with the blue mayonnaise.
That's right. Yeah, that's a whole. All right, moving on.
Well, thanks, Mark. We appreciate the menu.
Thank you for that.
That's craziness.
Be great.
All right, next up we have a message from Bill. He says he doesn't recall anyone mentioning the record-breaking tomato plant along the Living with the Land boat ride during the last podcast, and I have the link here for the Guinness Book of World Records. Unfortunately, I also don't think it was there when I rode last week. I don't know, Todd, did you see it when you went?
Yeah, JT, actually, they did mention that. There was a tomato plant there that lived for about 11 months, and they harvested 32,194 tomatoes off of it.
That is a lot of BLTs.
That's a lot of BLTs. That's right. The plants actually kind of lay down in this circular pattern, and they kind of wrap it around. And when I was there, they talked about this plant in particular, but they also showed us the oldest one there. I can't remember how old it was, a few months. And it was something ridiculous, like 23 feet long or something. It was just one single vine. But they also let you pick up some of the different melons and different things there. So it was a great tour. I highly recommend it. If you guys haven't done it, yeah, just I think it was only $25 or something like that. So it's definitely worth the 45 minutes.
Did
Get
your
to taste
tour
cucumbers,
guide
too.
remind you of Willy Wonka in any way, like your last tour? Did he have a cane?
He did not have a cane. The only freebies we got were some little pieces of cucumber. So
They did get upset when Todd knelt down like Augustus Gloop and started drinking the
Right over the
boat
boat
path.
path.
what is pretty cool, it's pretty unrestricted in some areas. You can walk right up to those machines that spray the roots and look right into them, and you can see how they're made. There's like, there's tanks of water that aren't being used anymore, but the only thing you couldn't do was walk on the sand, for obvious reasons. But we were able to feed the fish, and they took you into the aquacell and all the different things. It was really interesting. A lot of neat agricultural information. So definitely worth it if you guys head down there.
All right. Well, Bill, we appreciate that fun fact and walk down the memory lane to the Guinness Book of World Records tomato at the land. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to say to us, podcast@RetroWDW.com. You can message us on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you can find us, or the email.
All right, well, it's time for this month's Audio Rewind. As always, we play a clip of audio from the past, and how you were in charge of producing last month's audio. So, do you think you stumped us?
I don't know, because part of the name of the parade is actually right in the song. So even though that did fool a number of listeners, I tried to throw a little bone there and have it.
Yeah, it kind of gave it a little hint. So let's see.
Everybody did get the era. That's the one
Yeah.
thing. It's like everyone nailed the year. They just may have picked the wrong parade.
And it definitely has a specific era to it. Just from the silliness of it. Let's do this. Let's take a listen to last month's Audio Rewind Puzzler.
Yo there! Listen up, all you rad dudes! Walt's house is rocking with a mania that's hit the street with a brand new beat!
Gosh, sounds like a party. Maybe I should bake a cake. Tippers, Goofy! It's not that kind of party. It's a death tip.
All right, so if you guessed the Mickey Mania Parade, you are correct. And we received quite a few answers last month for this. And last month's winner is James Bolen. So congratulations, James. You'll be receiving the pins and some assorted Walt Disney World ephemera from years past. And as always, we have to pick out a prize for this month. And we had a listener write in, David Eppen, and he had a lot of different pieces of ephemera and postcards and all sorts of great magazines and things that he asked if we'd like to give away. So thanks to David, this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler prize is a GAF guide to Walt Disney World. It was the information guide that you would get and walk around the parks, just like the park maps you get today, but they were actually sponsored. For those of you that don't know, GAF was a company that made, as they say on the back, quality photo products. So that was slide projectors, film, cameras, movie projectors, etc. And the GAF was the official film of Walt Disney World for a number of years. How do you remember when Kodak came in? Do you know what year that was?
I remember when Polaroid came in.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Before Kodak.
You didn't need a camera center. Well, I guess
So you had GAF, and then you had Polaroid, and then I think Kodak came in with Epcot in '82.
yes,
was
because they
Kodak's
wanted the
big
red
introduction.
concrete, right?
And that's when they got into imagination and stuff. So
Right, but we should note this is a very appropriate time to mention was it GAF or Polaroid, Hal, that had the photo opportunity on Main Street USA.
Yeah.
They did like the old timey photos, like where you dressed up and
dressed
took
up.
your
I have those.
Like with the guns, the Old West
Well,
photos?
they did too. They would do one in a sepia tone, and I think eventually they did over Lake Buena Vista Shopping Village. But you would dress up in, as Brian said, old timey dress, and they also did one that was on the back of a train. It was supposed to be on the end of the railroad car,
Right.
And then the one at Lake Buena Vista, I think, was just like you went to a photographer or something. But yeah, where was that? Was that?
I assume it was in the camera center. We never did that, but
So I will see if I can dig it out. We did the one on the back of the train, and we also did the sepia tone one. So I'm going to see if I can figure those out. So congratulations again to James Bolen. But before we move on to the prize pot, though, let's take a listen to this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler. If you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler, send your guesses to podcast@RetroWDW.com. All entries should be received by June 20th, 2017. Correct entries will be entered into a drawing to see who wins this month's prize, and all entries, whether they are correct or not, will be entered into the prize pot drawing, the Part 2 prize pot drawing, to take place in December 2017. So that means that this is June. So JT, what does that mean?
That means it is prize pot giveaway time, because we're doing two this year. First half of the year, we'll say a winter spring prize pot, and then we have a summer fall prize pot.
Exactly. So why don't you tell, you've been keeping track of the list as you always do, right?
Got it.
Why don't you tell the listeners there, what do we have? What do we got in the whole pot?
Starting in January, way back in January, the Walt Disney at the Fair 4-CD set. February, that was a mystery prize, if you remember. We didn't reveal it until later. The official album of WDW, Walt Disney World 1981 LP record. March, Little Golden Book, Surprise to Mickey Mouse from 1971. And last month we had the book entitled All Aboard, All About the Disney Trains.
That's right. So for the final item that we're going to send in here is the Walt Disney World, a pictorial souvenir in very, very good condition, actually, I must say. This is again from David Eppen, so thank you very much. It's the 1977 edition. I've got it here, and it has some fantastic pictures of, you've probably seen a lot of these photos over the years, but it goes through all the different lands of the Magic Kingdom. Even has a great shot of the lounge up at the top of the Contemporary, and amongst other things. So it's awesome how good these have held up over the years and what great condition this is in. So we're going to throw that into the prize pot as well. And JT, are you ready to go down and start up the random number generator?
I will be happy to do it. We're going to demand a lot out of it here in 2017. 2 runs. The number I came up with is the number 37.
37. Let's look down through the list. And it is Tammy Norman.
Tammy!
So
Right, Tammy.
congratulations. So Tammy, you win the half-a-year prize pot. You'll get all the things that we mentioned, so we'll be in touch with you shortly to get that out to you. So if you did not win this half-year's prize pot, don't worry. As we said earlier, all entries, whether they're right or wrong, are entered into the big prize pot drawing, and we'll be doing another one in December 2017. Again, for this month, if you get your entries in to podcast@RetroWDW.com before June 20th, 2017.
This is the NBC Television Network.
All right, well, it's time for this month's main topic. As we said earlier, we're going to be talking about some of the primetime specials that the Disney Company aired over the years. And specifically, we're going through the Magic Kingdom opening, the Epcot opening, the MGM Grand opening, and then we're going to talk about the Muppets at Walt Disney World. So we're each going to take one of these television specials, talk a little bit about it, and walk you through what they were. So let's kick it off. Let's do this in chronological order, guys. So I'm going to start off here with the Magic Kingdom Grand Opening television special. So we all know that the Magic Kingdom opened October 1st, 1971 officially, and they did all the dedication when Roy was there was done on October 25th. This special was filmed between the 23rd and the 25th during the 3-day opening celebrations that they had. This special aired on NBC on October 29th, 1971. So they really didn't have a lot of post-production time, just 3-4 days there. Its official host was Julie Andrews, and special guest stars Glenn Campbell, Buddy Hackett, Jonathan Winters, and Bob Hope. So we're going to go through a couple of the scenes here, how this whole thing plays out. A lot of it is done really well.
When the sun came up this morning, I took the time to watch it rise.
The special opens with Glenn Campbell singing one of his songs called Today Is Mine, and you're flying over all this barren Central Florida land, and all of a sudden, there he is in this barren land with a guitar coming out of nowhere, and he walks up to a monorail beam at the very end, and you can see the monorail go over it. I think they filmed it pretty much north of the Grand Floridian, just before it makes the turn to go to the Magic Kingdom. I was really looking for Roy's cabin in a lot of these overhead shots because they're going through all this land. But when Glenn finishes up the song, I recommend everybody to put it on, because you're going to really recognize, if you know this podcast, you're going to recognize the music at this point in the special. And that same piece is played quite often, actually, through the special. Once that finishes up, we cut to Julie Andrews, and she's riding the monorail, and she starts to talk about what the Magic Kingdom is, and what all Walt Disney World is. And all of a sudden, she's on one of the side wheelers. It's singing When You Wish Upon a Star, and then she's in the Magic Kingdom, and immediately goes into a dance number on Main Street, USA. Now, this is all done with When You Wish Upon a Star, but then it transitions to this funky 70s version of Zippity Doo Dah, which is actually pretty cool for a disco type version of it. So anyway, I like the version of Zippity Doo Dah. It's got this funky 70s vibe to it. But we joked about other shows, other specials where Shields and Yarnell, and especially the Mouseketeers and the Christmas special, how weird it is. And this is the beginning of the corniness. So Jonathan Winters has a couple scenes here coming up, and his first scene, and for those of you who know, Jonathan Winters, famous actor, and he had a television show. One of a really interesting anecdote about him is that his first public demonstration of color videotape was actually the Jonathan Winters show. But you'll recognize him from a lot of different.
He was on the last season of Mork and Mindy.
That's right.
He was the voice of Grandpa Smurf on the television show The Smurfs, when the animated film. Right. Yeah. Yogi's Treasure Hunt, Pound Puppies, of all things. So, and he was a regular on Hee Haw as well.
Where it's going to come up later too.
Yeah. So there we go. So here's where it gets, like I said, this is where it gets corny. Somehow he pulls up into a convertible with his he's in the passenger seat, and his wife Margaret is sitting next to him, and there's 6 kids in the back of the convertible, 2 sitting on the back. Mavis, Teddy, Sissy, June, Harry, and Tony, as he calls them. And he claims that they've driven this way for 2 days and 2 nights. 2 kids hanging off the back deck of a convertible. And he did this vacation so Margaret could get out of the hot, sweaty kitchen. And she's falling asleep at the wheel, apparently exhausted. And she's really, in an odd, frozen way, just sitting there, just really, really bizarre. And he's trying to coax her out of the car and saying how this vacation is for you and it's going to be really, really great. And he sends the kids off. And then he starts calling for Billy and Jean, who he didn't even mention the first 6 kids. So you're wondering where things are going.
Here, you kids. Mavis, Billy Joe, come over here. Mavis and Billy, Jean, come over here. Never mind, Billy, you stay back there. Get a hold of the tent over there. You kids, you grab her here by the wrists. Start moving them like that. Here, honey, down around the ankles. You're dogging it, Margaret. You're dogging it. Huh? What are you trying to tell me, Margaret? You see, you talked too much in the earlier years when we were first married.
So this whole thing is horribly slow and horribly acted. The kids don't say a thing. They just get up and run away from the convertible, and he tries to coax her, saying, we're going to have a lot of fun at Disney World. So you think this is going somewhere. Cut to Glenn Campbell. He's now arriving by a boat, and he introduces us to the Contemporary.
Which, that is such a clean look at the Contemporary. Like, nothing growing around. It's like it's just fell out of the sky. It's just nothing. Yeah.
There's nothing there at all.
He's in a light tan. The Contemporary is a light tan. Like everything is just this light tan.
So at this point, you see the express monorail, which they're actually running backwards, pulling in, and out steps Bob Hope. And we talked about Tom Nabby on that Tom Nabby episode, and he told us about where they built that and how it was specially built for the grand
And then
opening.
last October, he showed us where they built that.
Exactly, yeah. So we know exactly where it was. And Bob Hope, there's like 3 levels to this platform, and they only really show him coming off to the first platform going down, and he just strikes a barrage of now dated jokes.
Hit after hit.
Oh my God. Well, he starts off with,
Thank you, girls. Wait for me in Adventureland.
Boom.
and then he starts talking about the contemporary, and he says,
Hey, what a building. Now I know where the Goodyear blimp goes during the mating season.
Boom.
So this is the point in time where I have to give my obligatory observation that at no time in my 43 years of life did I ever think Bob Hope was funny. And I would see him, they'd roll him out for these USO specials, and they'd roll him out for every TV thing, and he'd tell these awful jokes. And old people would be slapping their knee like they're listening to Stephen Wright in his prime. Like, you know, they're falling off their chairs. And I'm like, this guy is not funny. Like,
yeah. So he goes into a couple more of them. I mean, one of them here, he keeps harping on the shape of the contemporary.
You saw this beautifully engineered modern hotel from the outside. It has a very unusual shape. Matter of fact, a nearsighted flamingo has been sitting on the tower for weeks trying to hatch it.
It doesn't even look like the blimp or an egg. I don't know where he got this from. And then the last one is, hotels put Bibles in your room. Here, Billy Graham comes up and reads it to you.
I don't even understand why that's funny. Like, how is that a joke?
Billy Graham was very popular at the time.
I get that. I get that. But why
So
would
prestigious is this location?
Yeah.
I'm surprised he doesn't have the golf club, though, when he's doing his act.
No. And the funny thing is, the crowd's reacting, but you almost feel like it's canned laughter put in. It's just...
It is, because there's no way anybody laughed at that. We
Right.
should mention that the Tom Nabby story about this platform and all of this is when Bob Hope got off the train, the monorail was making, the idling monorail was making so much noise that it was interfering with the audio for Bob Hope's routine. And so they're over the microphone screaming, like over the walkie-talkies, like, get that motor off. And the guy reached up and just hit the kill switch on the monorail, right? Because there's no way to turn it off. The guy reached up and hit the kill switch so that they could record Bob Hope and his corny jokes.
Yep. Yeah. So that falls flat, and we move on. I mean, really, it does.
That's the funniest thing that happened that day.
So Julie Andrews comes out next, and she introduces a special orchestra who is conducted by Arthur Fiedler in front of the castle, and they play a number of different songs.
Now, he was famous in the 1970s because he was the conductor of the Boston Pops, and there was a show on PBS that ran every Sunday night, I think, that was enormously popular.
And then they would do all the 4th of July specials and our Star Spangled this and that, and it was all Arthur Fiedler. And he sold records and
all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
The premier conductor of 1971.
Yeah.
So he was big for that time. So after that, we go into the Country Bears, and what's the running time on that, guys? 12 minutes, right? They show nearly 6 minutes of the attraction.
Yeah.
Glenn Campbell rips into another song in Frontierland, and Come On Sunshine, and it's pretty cool. You see the keel boats and everything.
I saw the milkman, I saw the businessman, I saw the only road in sight. And then I got to thinking, what makes you want to go to know the wherefore and the why?
Then he goes in and checks out the stockades and talks about America, and he goes to the Hall of Presidents, and they show us.
Now, the stockades is interesting there because they were actually too small for you to put your head in at that point. And he actually talks about how you wouldn't want to do that.
That's because you can't.
So I see that.
That's a good point, yeah.
So, tiny stockades.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So he goes over the Hall of Presidents, and they show us 6 minutes of that. And then we get back to Jonathan Winters and Margaret. So cut to them. They're at Fort Wilderness, JT. Apparently, Margaret has spent her whole afternoon setting up camp. He congratulates her on setting up the campground. Now, magically, 9 kids. He gathers them. There's 9 kids. He calls them family. And this is where this is bizarre.
Did you think that was Tinkerbell? Why, I'd know Tinkerbell if I saw her. That little funny gnat. It is Tinkerbell. Gee, I almost crippled her. Take a look at her wings. One of them's bent. Here, I'll straighten that out. You see that? What I'll do is just work those wings back and forth. Maybe give her a little mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Ever do that to a gnat? It's not easy. There she goes. Isn't that fantastic? Good luck to you, Tinkerbell.
The mommy gets up and runs off, literally, and he gets all the kids who have been, remember, they've been mute to this point, and gets them all to chant at once.
We're gonna track down Mommy. Yes.
End scene.
What? I don't.
So, guys, I have no idea where this is going to go, or as we're going to find out, there is no conclusion to this Jonathan Winters portion of it. So, it's so bizarre, don't you think? I mean, it's just...
The one thing that is amazing is they managed to get coordinating outfits for the entire family. It's like they're all in the same color family of like this red and this orange and this sort of like intense pink.
And they're all ages from like 18 to 7 or even 4 maybe.
Jonathan Winters was a very virile man.
Yes. So Julie Andrews takes us over the luau, and they show us some of the luau before the cove, which I believe was all footage of the opening ceremony stuff. We see the water pageant, some early electrical water pageant floats. The dolphins are really jumping much faster. There's fireworks from Barge, which is pretty cool.
That would have been the first running of the electric water pageant.
That's right. That's the one that was supposed to only last 2 weeks or something like that.
Right.
Then comes the big musical number, and we get this dance troupe that comes out and dances.
It is really something to see, so don't go away, 'cause you think you've seen everything you can see. All the surprises from A down to Z. Hold back your boredom and hide the ennui. You just got your foot in the door.
But we see some cool things: the uncovered teacups, old Adventureland Bridge. They're doing a dance, the Skyway, and they're doing a dance in front of the entrance to Tomorrowland. There's just this big wall behind them because it hadn't been finished yet.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, it wasn't even the like sort of multicolored rainbow wall. It's just a gray or a green wall.
It was living up to the literal Tomorrowland. It's sometime tomorrow there'll be a land here.
That's right. So we get 6 minutes of the Mickey Mouse review, and then we get to Chick Hearn introducing racing legends at the Grand Prix Speedway. So he introduces Mark Donohue, Bobby Unser, and Jackie Stewart. Well, they were Formula One, I believe, in IndyCar. And Chick Hearn was an announcer for ABC, I believe. So, and the last one they announced is Leonard Hackett, which is, as we know, Buddy Hackett from Herbie. So they fight for cars, and Buddy Hackett doesn't get one, and he whistles, and out comes Herbie, and he gets out a big key and winds it up, and there's all this groovy music as they race around the track. And that ends with Buddy Hackett stopping and getting out of Herbie, and there's a big spoon in the road, and he goes,
"That's funny. There's supposed to be a fork in the road."
It's just, yeah.
No, that's
rough.
good. Oh man, you know what they do though? They have like the one thing that you will see in this is like their showcase spotlight car, the like number 74, which has these like sort of green flames on it. So look for that. That was cool. Like the fancy like Grand Prix car that was up on display for years.
Cool, pretty cool.
Yeah.
The next scene, I'm not even going to talk about it. It was Jonathan Winters doing some odd Georgian hillbilly stories about a dog. I mean, it goes on and on. I just go watch it. You can see we're now getting up to the end here. Julie Andrews does another song from the Skyway, and she goes in the Small World, breaks into that song, and then she's got kids from around the world come out of the attraction, and they go over to the carousel and such. And then we go over to Bob Hope, who talks a little bit about this is what wanted. It's an escape for all ages, and then we get to the big parade. Now this parade's got the giant Mickey drum. What was that thing? 10, 12 feet across. I mean, it was pretty big. But the highlight really was when the Herald Trumpeters of the U.S. Army Band lined on the top of all the buildings in Main Street, and they signaled the arrival of 1,076 member marching band, and all these musicians went down the street. It was directed by Meredith Willson, who was the Music Man, writer, and composer. So he directed all that. And just to give you an idea of how many people that is, that stretched from the main entrance to the train station all the way up to Cinderella Castle. And they played 76 trombones. They had a big choir, and they sang When You Wish Upon a Star. And then the larger-than-life drum floats that they had were opened and released, and from the top of the building they released them as well. 50,000 helium-filled balloons. I mean, today they would never let them do that with the environmental hazards, I guess. But
they could have took down a jet with them.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's
do
just
not fly over the park.
So, but you know, and it ends there. You cue the balloon release, the credits roll, and it's all over. And what I found odd about this whole thing is that one, the Jonathan Winters story is never resolved. Mommy runs off, right? And we never know if they found her. It just
she was the smart one.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
I don't have to take this anymore.
I'm out of here. And what was also odd is that they did not include any dedication footage. You know, Roy saying anything. There was nothing in there whatsoever. So, but you know, this is really the beginning of these opening ceremonies and also these primetime specials, and the corniness certainly did not end there, which takes us to 1982.
In a transition, I want to offer an explanation to our listeners who were not among the living in the 70s and 80s, because you have to understand that in entertainment and media at that time, you had the three networks, CBS, ABC, NBC, public broadcasting, and then a few UHF channels. No cable, at least not in the 70s. No satellite TV, none of that. So your opportunity, I mean, Glenn Campbell was one of the biggest recording stars in the world at the time this opened up. You know, just to name one of the guys that's involved in this special. Your opportunity to see your favorite artist, there was no such thing as seeing them on demand. So when they were, you know, now we can pull it up on YouTube, or there's 100 cable channels, or even before MTV was around, the only time you saw your musical acts that you loved was if you paid to see them in concert. You didn't own a VCR or anything. You couldn't watch them on tape at home. So them being in a special or a variety show was a big deal. You tuned in to see them. And so Julie Andrews and Jonathan Winters, they were all selling points. Mm-hmm. So when these shows seem kind of odd to us, that you watch them now and it's 20 minutes of Glenn Campbell singing different songs, you're like, what? You know, why would that have anything to do with it? Like, that was the hook to keep you watching. So you know, just so you kind of understand why these specials, at least in the early years, aren't so much about the park. As they are, the park's a backdrop for the entertainers like Bob Hope to tell their awful jokes. So that's a great setup for the next special, which is October 1st, 1982, and the opening of Epcot Center. And the special, which we have a great TV guide advertisement for it, which we'll have to tweet out on Facebook and all that when we're promoting the show. But the lead guy in it, the host of it, was Danny Kaye. Danny Kaye would be most familiar to our listeners, if he's familiar at all, from his role in the movie White Christmas with Bing Crosby. And if you never saw White Christmas with Bing Crosby, you may recognize him from Clark Griswold's Freak Out in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, when he says we're going to have the happiest Christmas since Bing Crosby tap dance with Danny deleted Kaye. So that's Danny Kaye. He is the...
See, now I remember him from Hans Christian Andersen.
Well, okay,
which they used to run, and he sings a very famous song, Inchworm. Yes. Which he was on the Muppet Show then, and he sang Inchworm in that too, yeah.
And as all specials like this did back then, they open up with...
Ladies and gentlemen, Epcot Center, the opening celebration, with your host, Danny Kaye, and guest, Drew Barrymore. Roy Clark, Alex Haley, Marie Osmond, Eric Severide, Alan Shepard, Dreamfinder and Figment, Zico and Smart One, the West Point Glee Club, and the All-American College Marching Band.
So when I refer to these people through the show, I'm going to run through the list now so you know who they are. Drew Barrymore, who at the time was 6 years old, had just starred in E.T., which had only come out in June of that year. So it was only she had only become famous a few months earlier. So Roy Clark was the host of Hee Haw, which was a big country variety show that ran from 1969 into the 90s. So this was kind of right in the sweet spot of his fame. Also at the time, Hunt's Ketchup was the official ketchup of Walt Disney World, and Roy Clark starred in their TV commercials for Hunt's Ketchup, always mentioning that it was the official ketchup of Walt Disney World. So that Roy Clark's in the show. Alex Haley, famous author of Roots, and he's there a little later on in the show to talk about the Never Built Africa Pavilion. Marie Osmond, who was part of the famous Osmond family, and she was the only girl in the Osmond family. So famous at that time from the variety show Donnie and Marie. Eric Severide, who was one of the top CBS newsmen for 50 years, worked for Edward R. Murrow, etc. Alan Shepard, who was an astronaut. Dreamfinder and Figment were two of the people they introduced to. Two robots. Smart One, who we've referred to in the past, was in the parks from day one, and a robot that we'll talk about tonight named Seiko. The West Point Glee Club and the All-American College Marching Band. So that's your overture beforehand. Danny Kaye opens up the show in the rain, overlooking the American Adventure Pavilion, and tells us all that the realization of Walt Disney's dream to create a permanent showcase of technology and world culture was Epcot Center, and that's where we are. So he then goes into a song and dance number.
21st century's here. It's time for the dream to come true. This glorious figment of one man's imagination. It started a long time ago.
And I will tell you off the bat, 50% of this show is Danny Kaye song and dance numbers.
Yeah.
Another 25% of it is Roy Clark singing, and there's a little tiny bit of Epcot fit in there.
A lot of stock footage and a lot of footage. A lot of us have seen before in pictures.
Well,
and stuff.
you've seen now. At that time, I mean, I don't know. There was, it was the initial footage of the park back then.
Right.
So he goes through this 21st Century Begins Today song. And that shows a lot of the conception with, it opens with Walt doing his Epcot presentation. You see Herb Ryman doing artwork for the park. There's shots of Isaac Asimov and talking with Imagineers. And then it yields to construction scenes. You move into the construction. And then you get to the middle eight of the song. He spends 4 minutes telling you what Epcot is by telling you what it isn't.
It isn't just a resort. It isn't just a World's Fair. Not just a cavalcade of wizardry, technology, and flair. It's not just Epicurean displays by international gourmets where one can dine, lunch, munch, crunch for days and days and days.
As you can see, that goes on forever. And then when you're 6 minutes into the show and you've done this long song, all of a sudden you see the giant dolls.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. So as you know, when Epcot opened, there were no traditional Disney characters, but they did have robots, and their meet and greet characters throughout World Showcase were these gigantic dolls whose eyes blinked as they stole your soul. So
can you imagine if instead of Drew Barrymore they got the little girl from Poltergeist? how awful those would be.
So,
Carol Ann, Epcot's calling.
Just TVs over there with fuzz on them all throughout the thing. Anyway, the song concludes with not Mickey Mouse waving from the top of Spaceship Earth. Obviously degradation of the, these are YouTube videos that we have to watch of this, but degradation of the video over the years. I can't make out if we're supposed to be able to tell who's on top of Spaceship Earth, but someone is up there waving, and it's not a character.
It's just a construction
That's what
worker
I thought,
with a hard hat, yeah.
So anyway, Mickey waves at you. And then Spaceship Earth opens up the show with Danny Kaye talking to Alan Shepard, the astronaut, about where the future of mankind is headed. And they talk about exploring space and the oceans. And then they dismiss Alan Shepard, who you never see again. And
makes sense.
Danny Kaye moves over to Drew Barrymore, 6-year-old Drew Barrymore, who introduces him to Seiko the robot. Seiko is a robot that you may recognize from Rocky IV. He is the gift that Rocky gives Paulie for his birthday at the beginning of Rocky IV.
Happy birthday, Paulie.
Happy birthday, Paulie. Right. And it's parodied in Family Guy and a bunch of other things, standard 1980s robot. But a quick side note, Seiko was a robot built by a group to interact with autistic kids. And that's what Seiko was built for and excelled at, where they wouldn't necessarily converse always with people. It was a robot that could be operated out of sight by someone, and they could talk, and so this robot is not interacting with an autistic child; it's interacting with Drew Barrymore and Danny Kaye. And so they meet Seiko, and Seiko introduces them to Dreamfinder and Figment.
Dreamfinder, this is Master K and Drew. Drew and Master K meet the keeper of the sparks of imagination, Dreamfinder.
It's nice to meet you. And this is my assistant and good right arm, Figment.
Apparently, Seiko has magical powers because they say, we'll meet Dreamfinder and Figment. And then Seiko just summons them, and they appear in a poof. So Seiko's got magnetic robotic powers, apparently. Dreamfinder recites a rhyme as they play scenes of him running through some of the show scenes in imagination that are complete, because you'll remember the attraction wasn't finished yet. And then when they're done their little 2-minute segment with Dreamfinder and Figment, they move on to Roy Clark. Roy Clark introduces the Land Pavilion and talks a lot about food while showing scenes from Kitchen Cabaret and Listen to the Land, and he mentions symbiosis as well.
But believe me, once you've been through this place, you'll have a whole new appreciation of what it takes to feed your face and the faces of billions of others on the face of the earth.
And then he boards one of the Listen to the Land boats, and as it sails through the greenhouse, he sings, "This land is your land." And he's sitting on an edge of this thing with a few people who are riding the boat, but they are facing forward, not looking back at this guitarist singing to them, while he has a chorus of women backup singers that are accompanying him and staring at him dreamily. So
could we replicate that, you think? Could we do that?
I thought about that. We can Roy Clark is still alive.
Yeah.
We could probably book him to come and ride with us and play his guitar and sing "This Land Is Your Land." So when the song is over, Danny and Roy are now standing in the greenhouse, taking their own behind the scenes tour as they walk through the greenhouse, and then they meet up with, if you listen to our last episode, Carl Hodges from the University of Arizona, who was the horticulturist who had so much to do with the design and construction of the land and that attraction. So Roy Clark asks him if he can, keeping with the high quality jokes that we started with in the 1971 special, Roy Clark asked him if he can grow an olive with a martini in it. JT, that reaction is exactly the reaction Carl had. And then Danny thanks him for, are you ready for your pun? Dishing the dirt. Now, thank God, if you've tired of this early 1980s hokey humor, there is relief, because Seiko then appears in Communicore with Smart One to talk about Communicore. And for early Epcot fans, Communicore was just one of the coolest places to go.
Hi, cutie. What's your name?
Smart One. What's yours?
They call me Zico. Do you live around here?
Sure do. Work here too. Right in the Communicore.
You have two robots having a conversation about Communicore. And then Danny Kaye says, enough with Future World. He takes us into World Showcase. As you can imagine, there's a very long song and dance number as he takes you through each country. And he sings from the back of the Friendship 2. And then they're interspersing scenes of him interacting with cast members from each of the opening countries.
Come see our fellowship showcase of the world. You'll feel a spirit like no place in the world. You may come face to face with the whole human race in this constantly expanding land of peace and understanding.
Yeah, the song, it runs for like 5 or 6 minutes almost.
It's a long time.
Pretty lengthy.
It's a really long time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I'm watching this and there's a lot of stuff going on. There's crane shots, there's Steadicam shots, there's all kinds of things.
As with the rest of Epcot, this was big, bold. There's nothing low scale about this special.
We spared no expense.
Well, that's true. The frustrating thing about it is, if for a park fan today looking back at it, you wish you could see more of the park and more of what was in it, and a lot of times they just kind of glaze over whole pavilions with 20 seconds of stock footage, and then they move on to another song or something.
They felt also too, if you could get 2 seconds of that and 5 seconds of this and 4 seconds of this, you're sitting there going, I got to go see this. I want to see more of it. So the more little quick shots they could give you, the best. The better they would have a chance of you getting down there. Yeah.
The fountain in front of the American Adventure is shooting water like 20 or 30 feet up into the sky. I don't think it does that anymore.
So and I wish I could remember which book, Sully, Tom Nabby, somebody's book, has a story about that, about how that used to shoot up really high, and the water would blow all over the place with those Florida winds and soak people walking through the plaza. And so they eventually had to ratchet it down because it was soaking people. So anyway, they now, which clearly if you watch it, it is wedged into this special. It's almost out of place. There is a literal 60-second drop-in of Danny Kaye visiting Alex Haley at what we know today is the site of the African Outpost on World Showcase. But Alex Haley, the author of Roots, standing behind a model of what was to be the Equatorial Africa Pavilion, which at the beginning of their conversation and at the end, Alex says, I'll see you here in Equatorial Africa next year when it opens.
Oh. You presume correctly. Welcome to Equatorial Africa.
Well, thank you very much. Am I too early?
About a year, but it's always nice to see you.
So it was one of the original pavilions that they intended to build. And then people kept trying to take over their company and they were out of money, so they couldn't build it. So that pavilion never got built. Marie Osmond then jumps in and sings a song about America as they show the pavilion behind her, and she's joined by several dozen dancers from the Amman Folk Group on stage where the America Gardens Theater is located. The theater wasn't there then, it was just a stage that was built for this purpose. Behind-the-scenes feature on the original film from the China Pavilion then runs with Danny Kaye kind of narrating. Again, a very big deal when Epcot opened. I mean, China was a closed society to American tourists, to tourists all over the world. There were no pictures from China or anything like that inside the Forbidden City or in rural China. It just wasn't, communist China was not a place you could just go and tour around if you felt like it. So Disney being allowed to come in there for 4 months and film inside the Forbidden City, the original Circle Vision, I think it was called Mysteries of China, that had a lot of footage of things that you couldn't see anywhere else. So Disney really talked that up when they opened this pavilion, and they spent a few minutes on the special really promoting that as one of the really cool things to come and see. And if you've never sat through that film, I do recommend it. Even today they've updated it since then. I think about 10 years ago, but it's still a very good film. So after that, Eric Savaride then comes in. Eric Savaride was a CBS newsman, as I mentioned, but his connection to Disney is that when Walt Disney died, Eric Savaride was the host of the anchor of the CBS Evening News that night, and he read this tribute. I prepared like this 4-minute tribute monologue to Walt Disney. And so that was very famous. So they brought him in. This was like the Walt Disney legacy portion of the special. Him and Danny Kaye sitting somewhere in Epcot. He asks Eric to recite a portion of that monologue, which he does about Walt. And they say some nice things about Walt. And then they move on to Danny Kaye, the big finale, which Todd was in hysterics watching this. He's standing in front of the what is now the American Gardens Pavilion. He conducts the West Point Glee Club, singing "America the Beautiful," and then halfway through that, the All-American College Marching Band moves in, and as soon as "America the Beautiful's done, they begin to play "This Is My Country" to close out the show. And Danny Kaye is conducting them and waving his arms and
flying himself
around,
all over the place.
and he is positively exhausted when the number finally ends, and he breathlessly thanks everybody for tuning in and watching this show from Epcot Center.
Oh, boy. I must tell you, I've had a wonderful time here at Epcot. And I hope some of you shared that feeling as well.
Like you want to call like the first aid stand over at the Odyssey and say, "Hey, buddy, we better get somebody over here."
Why they didn't just let him rest for 5 minutes? It was all pre-taped. It wasn't live. Nobody would have never known, and his hair is all like tousled,
disheveled, and I mean, it really, it's an A for effort, guys. It is an A for effort.
He probably was all yelling at him, "I'm gonna do it live."
Yeah, it's fun to watch for the kitsch factor. It's fun to watch to see the park, really what it looked like the day it opened, because most of that stuff was shot in those few days around when the park opened. But I wouldn't give it I don't really regard it as a particularly high quality special that gives you a lot of insight into the theories and all behind the park.
Right.
But you do get a sense of the wonder and excitement of the park and a lot of the focus on technology in the future and all that.
And that one that had a running time of an hour, and then I know the Magic Kingdom one was an hour and a half. And by the time we get to 1989, JT, we have a rousing 2-hour special to open up the studios.
Tonight on a special presentation of the magical world of Disney.
The grand opening of the Disney MGM Studios theme park.
Join James Stewart, Smokey Robinson, Jane Fonda, John Forsythe, Stephanie Powers, Buster Poindexter, Kate Jackson, Dick Van Dyke, Ann Miller, Ashburton Simpson, Suzanne Summers, Kathy Lee Crosby, Tony Randall, Rue McClanahan, Estelle Getty, and more superstars and more famous cars.
This is going to be great.
The Disney MGM Studios theme park grand opening, a world premiere exclusive next on the magical world of Disney.
After watching it, oh my God, the cheese! Like, I can see why you guys were just so that disappointment in GM Studios from the get go.
It's a different level of cheese. Though. We went 70s, we went 80s, and this 90s. The cheese that at least I remember from watching this thing in the past was that it was this whole "we're making movies here." That's the cheese that always bothered me. And now you know where we get it.
I get it. I do. All right. Well, first off, you guys can fill in the holes here because this was 2 hours long, and I mean, I hate to say, if you can sit through this, and it's on YouTube, so there's some really solid 1989 commercials and things of that nature. But I'm gonna kick off the beginning scene. I thought was cool because I believe, and you guys always correct me on this stuff, Eisner's given his little intro in the animation building, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the glass block to me is the dead giveaway, and then we
That's that foyer before you actually walked inside of the inside of where the animators work.
Yes. Okay. Does this whole thing on the Hollywood that never was and always will be.
So sit back and enjoy this sneak preview of the Hollywood we've created in Florida. It's not so much a theme park as a state of mind. A Hollywood that never was and will always be.
We have our cast of characters then after that. Everybody from Smokey Robinson to Jimmy Stewart to Suzanne Summers. All these, at the time, like, were these big names? Like,
yeah.
I know who they are. I know they're big names. But I'm saying, like, okay, say you did this now. Would that be the equivalent of them putting, like, an A-list, Chris Pratt, Brad Pitt, is that?
No, because if you go through the special, I mean, the people that were there, aside from the current, because the Disney Buena Vista produced the Golden Girls, so you had Rue McClanahan and Estelle Getty there. But, like, John Ritter, his show had been off the air for 4 or 5 years. Same with Suzanne Summers. They were both on Three's Company. Smokey Robinson wasn't putting out hit records in 1989. I mean, he's
84, 85.
Right. But my point being, a lot of these people, this was 1989. They were 4 or 5 years since they had like a big thing.
Thought. And that's always the impression I got from MGM. Like, you'd go to the, we talked in chat about the cement, and like all the names in there, you didn't see like huge stars. Like, you saw, they're stars, but they're not like,
right.
I don't know. I feel like it was like A-.
So back then,
well, that's how you afford them.
Right. So we'll even talk about, I'll even throw Bette Midler in there. Bette Midler, right around that time, Beaches had come out, maybe a couple years later. I mean, she was a star, but she was not, I wouldn't consider her in her prime then. I thought her prime was earlier when she was doing The Rose and some of that stuff in the early 80s. But, Michael Eisner certainly loved her.
Yeah.
And put her in everything that he could, but...
I just looked at this list of stars like a B+ and A- list.
Right.
Like, not top notch.
I think A- is a great because they were probably still considered A-listers, but A-listers who had, were maybe on the warning list.
But they had their name had power when you put it in the coming attractions for the week. That it got you to tune in, and I think also too from like a John Ritter standpoint, Suzanne Summers. There was a comfort factor with somebody who you knew, whether or not they did something right now, you were comfortable listening to what they had to tell you or poorly acting in front of you, whichever.
Well, and I think the other thing we should probably mention too in the selection of the people who were there is back then, and it kind of evolved in the 90s, but back then, very much they really only had family-oriented stars at their things. So you didn't... you didn't have people who made R-rated movies and you wouldn't have Clint Eastwood or somebody there. Right. Like, that didn't happen. So a lot of the names there are from what were very wholesome programs or, clean programs.
All right. Well, okay. So, gosh, I love these shots, though. Like, you take away my star complaint. I like this back down shot they do down the main drag of Hollywood Studios. You see that, and we pan up to the crossroads of America, and on the roof is our friend Smokey Robinson up there doing a little dance number with some steps.
Intrigue, plots to bring disaster. Chases couldn't be much faster. Pageant orchestrated masterfully.
I don't, this is a few years removed, but this to me felt very Captain EO. I don't know, I could be wrong, but he had the lasers, like the pow, like here's his backup singers right there. And he kind of did his whole dance number down the street. We got him, all the crowd coming in, the backup vocals, the whole deal, doing their whole thing.
That goes pretty long too. I think that was another.
Oh yeah, we're at almost 11 minutes in before Mr. Ritter makes his appearance.
John Ritter, yeah.
He does this whole cheese thing, and I'll just get it out of the way now, where he's like, we got 2 days to talk about everything, get it all going, and then some guy walks up and is like,
excuse me, Mr. Ritter. Yeah, I'm on my way to my post, and I overheard you say something about the opening. It's not 2 days, it's less than 2 hours.
Less
than 2 hours before the grand opening?
2 hours, holy cow, we've got to get a lot done. So, I mean, in you know, lack of a better term, he gives us this big grand tour of the thing. We see, to start off, that 90s or late 80s Mickey Mouse Club going on there. They got a song number, and then we go to Catastrophe Canyon, which... I keep wanting to call him Travolta. Ritter's standing there getting just soaked with water. There's no train there or anything. He's just standing right at the front lines getting soaked.
Yeah, he stood right on the platform where the tram would come through and just, you know, acts like,
It's probably worth mentioning at the point you bring the Mouseketeers in how dramatically the company had changed from the 1982 special for Epcot to this opening one for MGM. I mean, between the Disney Channel starting... and them promoting all their original programs on that, their movie production had gone from a few movies a year to this massive schedule of not only, if you remember, at the time this park opened, Little Mermaid was just about to come out from the animation division, and they were making all these other popular movies from the Hollywood Pictures label that they owned. You know, contemporary adult pictures at that point, you know, third theme park, all the new hotels that they were opening and building. So, I mean, the company was 3-4 times the size that it was just 6 years earlier when they opened Epcot.
From there, we cut to Harry Anderson. And was his big thing Night Court at the time? Was that?
Yeah,
that was his only big thing.
He was a comedy magician. I mean, but his big, at the time he was Night Court.
He takes us into that area where this to me is, you know, it's all memorable, as you guys know to me, but we see the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids bee, the show in the blue screen.
And he makes like 7 different bee jokes.
Hi, I'm Harry Anderson, and this is my friend, the bee. He insisted on being here for the grand opening. I call him There. You see, they have this other bee that they call Square. I wasn't sure whether I should ride Be There or Be Square.
Yeah, he's riding the bee. We cut to the movie clip, and then he goes through like a, we'll say a storage room, a back lot where we see the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ray gun.
You used to walk through that
back lot
on
studio
the tour.
tour, yeah.
All the stuff in there, which you know is you guys have told me it wasn't really there.
Which was still there 20 years later when they closed the attraction. From the big contemporary film that was released 21 years ago. We have all the props.
Very late 80s, early 90s props there. And he gives us a little montage on the different clips of props that could be, you know, there. And a lot of Captain EO in there, a lot of Tron, Roger Rabbit at the time, just a little montage. We cut to the water tank. He's there in some high waters, just taking it in, and more John Ritter cheese shows up. John Ritter gets into the wheelhouse.
Fun. Is this going to be fun? Yeah, I know fun, John, and this is going to be fun. You go on in there. I should go in here? Just get in there and hold on to the wheel, Harry, and then we'll have fun. It's very moist in here. Huh? It's very moist. Are you having fun yet?
And Misfortune gets completely... covered in the water splashdown thing.
Yeah, Harry Anderson really does him a dirty there. It was, you just stay in here. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine, yeah.
But that was the big joke, even when they select the people. We need somebody who's strong and can take a dousing of water.
I really wanted to do it. I never got to. Did anybody of you guys ever?
I was the.
You would be that guy. You were on stage the other day. You're that guy, aren't you? They just pick you.
It was my wife, myself, my brother, and his girlfriend at the time, and I think I was one of the ones standing on the deck of the PT boat, and the boots stunk. By the way,
did
stunk
they?
like mildew. It was awful. The whole get up smelled like just nasty.
1989 boots. Maybe Ritter wore them.
Yeah. He could have.
So, I'm not going to cover all these, but interspersed throughout, I should mention Ronald Reagan doing little bumpers there, talking about the magic of movies.
Yeah, the whole show they had like 10 or 12 of these bumpers between commercials where they would have Jimmy Stewart and Jane Fonda and all these people coming in to talk about their first experience with movies or their best Hollywood memories, stuff like that.
Mr. Smith goes to Washington. I began to realize through the power of that motion picture that one man can make a difference.
John Forsythe, Dick Van Dyke, and the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular when we return.
And we also had some people pressing their hands in the cement. And one of the things that got me, because we had this car, They're showing the Lumina commercials, and some of them were even filmed like on the streets of America in front of the fake Chinese theater. Chevy and Disney at the time were interspersed. They even got some Fantasia animation in with the Chevy commercials.
Nice.
But so we kind of intro then for the adventure end of things. We cut to Indiana Jones, the epic stunt spectacular. We sort of see Ritter doing more cheese where the spears almost hit him, and then some Dick Van Dyke action in front of the theater there, talking about a great movie ride, showing clips of that. At the time, you guys know this, and I mean, that was the ride, the only ride there, short of, I think, was that it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were it was probably the only physical moving ride before Star Tours opened
from
up.
what we traditionally regard as, ride attractions, yeah. And, that
So
one
it
was obviously from the drawing boards of Epcot. That was supposed to be an Epcot pavilion originally, the movie one, and then they just moved it over to they decided to make a whole theme park out of it.
So yeah, we have some more movie memories. Then we get to the Superstar television end of things. We spend a lot of time on that, which honestly, I know more about that.
It's funny because that was really, really huge for its time, because the concept of green screen, you only saw in movies, but to be able to do it live in front of somebody, now you've got apps on your phone, you can do it.
So the funny thing is, as much as people will look at that and say, oh, wow, this is really cool, at the time, and how you might have more details on this, but Paramount was already doing an experience where you could be in Star Trek in their theme parks.
That's
where
right,
you could go in and I think you paid, and they dressed you up like a Klingon, and somebody was dressed up like this, and they produced a videotape, and then you got the souvenir videotape to keep of yourself.
Right. And what was, I guess, kind of interesting is the properties that they had in in Superstar Television. I mean, some of them were somewhat contemporary, like Cheers, I think, was still on the air, but I mean, a lot of them were really old. I mean, there was a Three Stooges segment and
I Love Lucy,
and I Love Lucy, which at least that was a classic bit, but like a Gilligan's Island, and it was a cross section of things that people recognized,
right?
But they certainly weren't like the hottest shows on television at that point.
This is my favorite film. It's a Wonderful Life.
Thanks, John, for pulling me out of the cement back there at the Chinese theater.
Well, I wish I hadn't pulled so hard. Where did you finally land, anyway?
Use the street.
All right, so another bumper from Jimmy Stewart, and we move into John Forsythe and John Ritter walking into the animation area again. More John Ritter cheese. He's got some tire tracks down his back, but he leaves. And Forsythe tells us about some animation stuff. We learn about ink and paint and that whole deal. Then John Forsythe moves to the streets of America, which, honestly, even at the time when I was, 7, 8 at the time, I was curious about this, because you see these houses and you're like, well, okay, I just didn't get it. But he walks down the thing. We see, Herbie down there with Goofy mowing the grass, streets of America. And then we have a song and dance number, again, on the streets of America. Who is this guy?
By none other than Buster Poindexter.
Buster Poindexter. Gosh, I don't even cut that out, because I didn't even know who he was. Basically,
it's not exactly a memorable. Well, it's memorable probably in the wrong way.
Who's the living dollar in the beautiful eyes? Well, the pair of lips are like a triumphant sign. I'll just tell her, baby, won't you swing with me? Won't you kiss me, baby, what a wing it'll be. So I say politely.
I should mention too what Poindexter's doing his thing. They're throwing in these things like they're filming it. The clapboard comes out, and they've got the fake cameras, and again pushing that we're filming here.
So then we're I'm skipping ahead here a little bit because we got some more song and dance numbers. I mean, it's just getting so played out here. But this, to me, we get to the parade, the cars with the stars,
superstars and the motor cars parade. Yeah.
Yeah, we got Eisner rolling in with Bette Midler. We got all of them coming in here. I saw George Lucas at one point. Oh, and Harry Anderson. He made another appearance.
But there's actually a couple of big names in there, like Tom Hanks or somebody is in. Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner's
Rick
there.
Moranis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty decent, and we move into some more Eisner talk, leading into the Pointer Sisters, and some pretty groovy outfits. If you know, I'm digging the outfits, and I'm so excited.
So well, yeah. And they're keeping with their last hit was a few years before that. So, and Neutron Dance and I'm so excited. Yeah,
very Captain EO-esque there too.
Yes,
well.
exactly. George Burns. I literally have never seen his comedy, and I know who he is, but
yeah. So this is two very bizarre sequences. John Ritter introduces George Burns, like, George Burns saluting the opening of Disney MGM Studios, and they cut to George Burns doing like a 10-minute stand-up set, but it's in like Vegas or something. Like,
does it have anything to do with?
It's literally like if you could cut in anybody's comedy special and drop 10 minutes of it into the show. It was.
There's a balcony in the audience and some palm tree hanging off the side. Yeah, it's definitely not down there.
So like they had nothing to do with Disney MGM Studios. He doesn't mention it during his act.
It's not even mention it.
No, it's like
we need some filler. Fill it. Go. And I love this. This keeps popping in there a few times. Ritter on the Earful Tower, but not really.
No, not on the real Earful Tower.
Yeah, I mean, he's like on a thing and they're blowing wind on him. I swear he's not up there. Do you agree, or am I the only one that...
I thought they had a mock-up.
Yeah, that's what I think. He's not up there.
That was down below
somewhere. It would be very
difficult
difficult to film what they filmed up there. Like, there isn't a scissor lift that goes up that high for them to film...
Yeah,
the way that they... Yeah, if you
too.
watch the shot, it was more than likely a recreation.
So then we cut to Willie Nelson, which to me seems like another...
It's They say that he's performing in the Indiana Jones Theater.
Oh.
That's how they introduce him. And I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I watched it a couple times. I couldn't really tell. It's possible that it is, and the Klieg lights and all are kind of facing out towards the audience. And you know, the most startling thing about it is seeing Willie as a younger man, like, you know, not all old and gristled the way we're used to seeing him. I mean, but again, he performs and says nothing about the Disney MGM Studios. It's just a Willie Nelson number.
So really, if you wanted to me, you cut out the last two acts, and they should have just smashed this on the end. This is the big number in front of this theater. You got the Hollywood looking dancers. They're hitting on famous movie songs.
Very big production number. Very big production number.
Hooray for Hollywood! Hooray for Hollywood! Hollywood! Hooray for Hollywood! That's
They used, huge production, and they used this footage in a lot of the travel log films and stuff with the people kicking and dancing in front of the Grumman's Theater there. I mean, it
really does pays tribute to Busby Berkeley and everything kind of the great movie ride's about. They do a good job in that number. Very big, Vegas style presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice ending, and
nobody's out of breath at the end of it.
So yeah, that's the 2-hour extravaganza MGM Studios grand opening.
The Muppets have arrived at the Disney MGM Studios theme park. Meet Kermit, Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, and all your Muppet favorites as they come to permanently leave their mark in this spectacular world of glitz and glamour.
Hey, everybody, it's time to do the show.
Sorry, what? Here come the Muppets, only at the Disney MGM Studios theme park.
How much time do you need for this?
It's a glorious 3-hour finale.
You got 20 minutes. With that, you can definitely tell we're talking about the Muppets at Walt Disney World. So this is just after, a little bit after the MGM special. And the Muppets, the deal had been signed to bring the Muppets into the Walt Disney World parks. And this is something that, as Hal's going to talk about, Henson worked on. It was one of his last things he worked on. So, Hal, take it away.
Sure. So the deal to acquire the Muppets by Disney was announced on August 29th, 1989. So just a little bit after Disney MGM opened. And in fact, if some of us remember, like, they had a sign out that said that was announcing the construction of like Muppet Studios.
Oh yeah,
back that you could see on the tour. So production on Muppet Vision 3D began in January of 1990, and then this television special, The Muppets at Walt Disney World, that went into production in March of 1990 and aired on May 6th of 1990. So almost just a little bit of a year past the grand opening special in the studio's opening. Jim unfortunately passed just 10 days later, so it was really the last special that he shot. He died on May 16th, 1990, and that actually led to the deal falling through. And it wasn't until much later then that Disney actually finalized the deal with the Muppets. But they got this special done, and of course Muppet Vision and the stage show set to go while he was still alive.
So really, this was an opening special to introduce the Muppets to everybody at Walt Disney World. That was the real point to it.
Yeah, and at the end, there's actually a part where Mickey welcomes them to the family. So this was very much a thing about like, hey, the Muppets are part of us now. Yep. So let's get together.
Exactly.
And actually, Eisner's cold opening is with Fozzie and Fozzie's mom inside the Grand Floridian, and he ends up getting attacked by the Muppets, and his suit is all ripped up by the time it's all over. But that's just the cold open, and it's not that great. In fact, there's some really funny outtakes from that have found their way on the internet that are in some ways actually better than the thing that actually ran on television.
Welcome, everyone. I'm in the lobby of the Gland Floridian.
Well, we could change the name.
I'm in the lobby of the Gland. Welcome, everyone. I'm in the lobby of the Grand Floridian.
Okay, who else can we get?
Now, the main show starts as a large cast of the Muppets make their way through the swamps of Florida. Kermit assures Miss Piggy that he's taking her to Paradise, and he does, his ancestral home of Paradise Swamp, which just so happens to be located behind Walt Disney World. Special quickly introduces an expanded role for Bean Bunny, who is a character who had his own TV special before he started showing up on Muppets Tonight and in the main ensemble. Scooter sort of matter-of-factly explains that Bean Bunny was hired because the other Muppets were sick of being cute. And so Bean's main function was to be cute, so that way the other Muppets didn't have to be cute anymore, which is a very meta thing for the Muppets to have. After a quick musical number in the swamp, during which Beaker and Bunsen, remember Beaker, Bunsen Honeydew's assistant?
Oh, yes.
He's the tall one that says, me, 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 me. Yeah. So he ends up with a bait bucket stuck to his head, which ends up becoming a running gag for the rest of the show. And then Kermit reveals a surprise.
And tonight, after the bug fry, we're going to sit around and listen to the fireworks from Walt Disney World.
Yeah, Walt Disney World.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. Walt Disney World is just on the other side of those trees over there.
Let's go, everybody! Yeah, go Walt Disney World.
But wait a second. What about the Frog Festival?
Kermit, you don't understand. You are asking us to choose between Walt Disney World and fried bugs.
So that leads us to Charles Grodin, who was known for films like Midnight Run. Brian, do you know some of his other...
Sure, The Incredible Shrinking Woman, and he was in Chevy Chase, what's it called, The Governor, hold on, oh God, he's the district attorney, his name's Ira Parks, it's terrible, but I can't, seems like old times.
Seems like times, okay.
Him and Goldie Hawn, but Midnight Run is what a lot of people know him from, and then he left acting for a long time. In the late 90s and early 2000s, he hosted his own talk show on MSNBC or CNBC, I think it was back then.
That's right.
And he's done a bit of acting. I just saw him in a Robert De Niro movie called The Comedian. So.
And he was also the left brain in Cranium Command.
Yes.
So there's a Disney connections from the year previous. So he plays this inept Disney MGM security guard named Quentin
wait. I'm sorry. We left out the Great Muppet Caper. He's
right.
He's one of the villains in the Great Muppet Caper.
So there's a Muppet connection. So the Muppets, Kermit forgets his wallet because he doesn't have any clothes. So he leaves his wallet in his knapsack so he can't buy admission for anyone. Animal ends up picking up one of the turnstiles and throwing it, and the Muppets bum rush the gates. And
Right. So we do have to note that with the setup being in the Kermit's swamp, the message they initially start the show with is the rest of Florida is so terrible, the only place you should go is Walt Disney World.
That's right, yeah.
Which is fairly true. That's actually... yeah.
Said the lifelong resident of Florida.
As we will see in this special, as in with many other specials, and especially some of the ABC shows now that tend to go to the parks, it's like the rules of space-time as it relates to Disney parks do not apply. Rides are next to each other that would never be there. You can go freely from Epcot to Disney MGM to the Magic Kingdom without any backstage bus. You're just boof, you're there. Turn around and you're someplace else. So Bean Bunny and Scooter appear at the Imagination Jumping Fountains, which are still in very nice condition at that point. Bunsen and Beaker go exploring World Showcase, and Beaker during this time just continually runs into lampposts and other objects because he can't see because he has a bucket on his head.
Which is a running gag throughout the show from that point forward.
And surprisingly hilarious. He can run into as many things as he can, and it made me laugh every time.
Yes. I will mention something too, because a lot of this was filmed with the real park audiences going on. Look behind the characters, and every now and then you'll see people trying to snap pictures or people staring, or they'll start to look down at the puppeteers. You know, you think... My wife was watching with me the other night, and she's like, "Do you think they did this green screen?" I'm like, "No, watch the people behind." You know,
yeah, you can see people turning around during the. At one point, they're doing they also do the motor car parade, and you can see them driving the car. Like you can see little kids turning around, pointing at them, and.
And then meanwhile, while that's going on, Gonzo and Camilla sort of have some of their own ideas.
Camilla, hon, here we are at last, just the two of us. Now, what would you like to see first? The Wonders of Life exhibit, or the ocean thing over there? What's that? Mom! Whoa! It's a used paper cup exhibit. Boy, these Disney people are always on the cutting edge. Camilla, look at those bent drinking straws. Oh! Yeah!
Now, Miss Piggy ends up teamed up with a character called Beauregard, who was kind of like the sort of like a stagehand who would sweep up on the Muppet Show.
Yep.
And he ends up taking her on like every thrill ride while they're there. Is like she just wants to get to the Chinese theater, but he ends up dragging her onto like Big Thunder Mountain, which is really funny to see because they have this version of her eyes that are like huge.
Yeah. And you know, I thought they just put the puppets on there, but if you look carefully, they're moving and they're doing things, and there's a puppeteer somehow strapped down in the bottom of the seat of. I cannot imagine riding that attraction. I mean, it's not a bad roller coaster, you know, it's not crazy, but not having any point of reference and being in some strange cockamamie position to put your hand up into the puppet can't be comfortable.
And it was each one, they were in their own seats, so it wasn't like they were trying to cram. It's like Piggy was in one seat behind, Beauregard was in the seat in front, so it's certainly not spacious, but you know, I'm sure the puppeteers are probably used to working in tight quarters and a lot of things like that. And then Rizzo the Rat ends up teaming up with Fitzwater to go find the other Muppets, which he misinterprets Kermit as Kismet, which is like a strange musical reference. So that one's not a really good gag.
The cell phone, or the mobile phone that
that
he's talking on, is this big giant yellow brick phone with a, you know, like a 9-inch rubber whip antenna. It's classic. I mean, you know, there's so many little things like that to look for that you wouldn't even think back then that would stand out today.
Totally 90s. Statler and Waldorf are sort of dressed as dandies. They ride around on the horse-drawn trolley on Main Street. And there's a really funny sequence where they discover that they have nothing to complain about, so they start complaining about the fact that they have nothing to complain about because Walt Disney World is so awesome.
I love it here. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's perfect. Absolutely. I can't think of a thing to complain about. It's pretty, pleasant, neat, clean. Yeah. I hate it when there's nothing to complain about. This is terrible. Yeah, why did we come to this miserable place? Boo! This! Close this dump down! Taxi! Taxi!
Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem are accompanied by Clifford, And they're riding around on the top level of one of the omnibuses, World Showcase, which is pretty cool. And they actually did, so they do a world tour around World Showcase because they can be home by dinner time if they do that. And they do a cover version of a song called Rockin' All Over the World by a band called Status Quo, which I had first seen at Live Aid in 1985. I was unfamiliar with the band, but I think they were the first act on Live Aid, so we got inundated by that as kids. So by the time characters appear again in front of MGM outside of Star Tours, Fitzwater is briefing the Seven Dwarfs, and he's added them to his security detail, which is a very odd gag.
Yeah, that one doesn't work because he's just, come on, Dopey, don't be dopey. I mean,
Yeah, and Bunsen Honeydew decorates Beaker's bucket with like a wig and sunglasses, and just as this first he paints eyes on it, so it looks more normal, and then he's got this huge sort of like girlish wig on it. It's just really funny. Oh, and he describes them as, if you thought me saying that Julie Andrews' smart outfit was weird, Bunsen Honeydew describes Beaker as having an exotic, almost sultry quality. And then Piggy is tricked into riding Star Tours by Beauregard, so you get a nice that was a pretty new ride, so you get a nice little inside view of Star Tours. This is cool. So they did a really good job of finding really odd locations at Walt Disney World. It wasn't just like the new attractions and the stuff that you would want to see. Ralph ends up going into the dog kennel.
And do you think they filmed that right in front of the one where it used to be at the Ticket and Transportation Center, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it looks
sure
like
did.
the building. It looks like it.
Mm-hmm. Because the one at Epcot was much nicer than that.
Yeah.
So that is. So he's said he's performing a musical number live from the detention hall of the Walt Disney World Pet Care Center. Which is weird then, because once you go inside, they have like all these very comfortable Victorian couches and pool tables and things.
And the dog, if you notice too, the dog from Sprocket from Fraggle Rock is one of the dogs in there.
Oh, there's like 20 dogs from different, like
all different movies.
Piggy's dog
From the Henson universe.
Yeah. But Sprocket's definitely in there.
We catch up with the Kermit, who is very sad now in front of Cinderella's castle.
Well, it's not easy being green.
No.
Yeah. And he is approached by a 5-year-old Raven Simone, who will end up later on the Cosby Show and later on in the Disney Channel, and That's So Raven. She sings him the Rainbow Connection to try to cheer him up, and then he has to run away from the security guard, and that sort of ends up that sequence. Now, this is a really cool one. So Gonzo and Camilla have been wandering through the utilidors, and they finally reach like this old massive laundry facility. I think it was the first one that was done on property, where they would launder all the cast costumes and all the bed linens. It's just enormous and grungy, and you can tell like it's been there for 20 years and it's just been beat on.
It looks like a sweatshop from the 1920s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just it's pretty impressive when you look at it and all the number of articles of clothing going through and everything. It's one of the only backstage things I've ever seen in one of these types of specials.
Yeah. So he thinks it's Laundryland, and he sings a very sweet song called "Love in a Laundry" to her.
Love in a laundromat. Who would have thought of that? Tumbling together in some fancy machine. I can't deny it was love at first sight.
We're starting to wrap up. We're about done. On the way back to the Chinese theater, the gang kind of reunites in front of the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular. And Piggy and Kermit are recruited into the show, so they become the leads. So Piggy becomes Karen Allen, and Kermit becomes Harrison Ford. And the entire time, it's like Kermit is acting out the Indiana Jones role, but he keeps apologizing for using violence to try to solve problems. So like he'll shoot somebody and like there'll be an explosion, and it'll be like, "Are you okay?" And they'll get up and wave to him, and he just like 5-6 times he's like, "This is not the way that you solve problems." So it's very funny to see him kind of like freaked out at the same time going through the motions. At the end, Piggy and Kermit are captured by Fitzwater, and then the gang are taken to see Mickey, who Kermit claims he's good friends with.
Yeah, well, Mickey and I are all buddies.
I didn't know you knew Mickey Mouse.
Sure, we're both members of FASA.
FASA?
Yeah, Fictional Animal Stars of America.
Animated Mickey.
Yeah.
Because if they had the, what we know as the Mickey costume that people wear, he'd be like 5 times as big as Kermit. So they use animated Mickey instead.
Yep. So Mickey, who's traditionally animated, and I don't know if that was done at Disney MGM. That would be one thing to find out if that was that scene of him was actually done there. They go into his office and he welcomes them to the family, and then he sends them off to the Chinese theater for a final musical number and to leave their footprints on the cement. And then they do they kind of revisit all the locations that you had saw previously as they're doing this musical number. And in fact, you see Fitzwater getting his comeuppance. He's having to scrape gum off the bottom of benches at Disney MGM for being a terrible person. So the Muppets return to the swamp, and they discover that they've left Miss Piggy behind, stuck in the cement. So there's that John Ritter gets
And John Ritter stayed there.
They're still there now.
Yeah, and she's as the credits roll, she's stuck in front of the theater and yelling for help. So it's a very that one was 45 minutes. It's an hour special with commercials and stuff, and the pace is really fast.
I was gonna say it goes quick even when you're watching, and it's of all the 4 that we talked about tonight, it's probably the one that you can sit through in its entirety, and I don't want to say relate, but laugh to and enjoy because of the difference in times.
And it was written by Henson and his people.
Right.
I mean, it was completely done by the Muppet people and not so much by the Disney people.
Right.
Yeah, it was written by Jerry Jewell, who's he wrote all the episodes of the Muppet Show, so it's a very Muppety. Definitely Muppety, but it was cool how much use they got out of stuff. There's a lot of things I didn't mention because some of these sequences really only last 30 seconds.
Yeah, they're short.
Like there's the Swedish chef does a thing where
he's preparing
makes
the tacos. Yeah.
Tacos in front of the Mexico pavilion.
Yeah,
and he gives Beaker a hot sauce taco, and the bait bucket goes off of his head like an explosion, but then lands back on it again. And there's all kinds of little bits of Fozzie Bear trying to earn some money to pay for lunch, and he bombs out, and then finally he's in front of the Country Bears and he performs for some of the actual the costumed versions of 2 of the Country Bears and Bongo from that short, and some other bears that we wouldn't even recognize as costumes anymore.
Right.
But it's a very quick moving special, and like you said, because of that, it's still pretty watchable today.
Yeah.
The humor hits well.
Well, and one of the things it does that we complain about in the other specials is this one really does show you a lot of the parks.
Right.
Everything is done at a different spot in the parks that you'll recognize. You just get a very good sense for what it was like to visit. And at that time, we get that question all the time as in terms of a golden age. Magic Kingdom, Epcot Center, Disney MGM Studios, right? A year into its opening, was a great time to visit those 3 parks.
Yep, very true.
Exactly. Well, guys, thank you for all your research and on each of us doing these different specials. So, as we said at the beginning of the episode, this is part 1 of some other television specials we'll be taking on in part 2. So, stay tuned in the future.
And let us know if it was interesting or boring.
Right.
For
so
you,
if it's boring, we won't go to part 2. I'll just tell myself some stories one night about the other ones. But we did get some tweets while we were recording here, and some people mentioned Craft, and I know we've talked about that one before. So if you want to see it, let us know, and we'll talk about it. So. All right. As always, every month we introduce some new merchandise. How you have not given us any hints of what you've produced. So is this going to be a surprise even later on than right now?
I think so. There's still a couple of things I want to clean up from our previous ones and improve, but I think after we talk tonight, I may have some other
Fair enough.
It made me think of some other things.
All right, excellent. So, as always, you can purchase all of Hal's designs that we've got here at the RetroWDW shop. You can get those at retrowdw.com/support us. And as always, our pins are available at retrowdw.com/pins. And all proceeds from any of those sales go directly into keeping this show on the air, helping us pay all the bills for the web server and the hosting and the podcasting and everything that we need to do. So really appreciate all of your support. While we're on the topic of retrowdw.com, for about a year now, we've been talking about a new site, and I want to give a big shout out to Jason Bartel of Deepwater Studios for working on the site very intensely over the past couple months, and obviously in the past couple weeks to get the new version of our website up and running. We went live back on May 19th, and we had a couple little kinks to work out, but it's working great. So you should see more content in the articles that go along with this podcast. We have better ways of streaming the films to you, and also too, the site is mobile ready now, so you should be able to get on your tablets and phones and should format a lot better. So again, thanks to Jason. And with that new software, you can see a lot of new things, especially on our Twitter account. We've got a way to post some photos. We're going to bring back old posts and old podcast episodes and old films now and then, because that stuff kind of gets forgotten in the list of blogs. So check us out at retrowdw.com. All right, guys, I think we're just about here to wrap it up. I think we should probably just mention with the Epcot 35 event coming up in October, and we had a small episode last month, episode 29.35, where we talked a little bit about us potentially doing an event down there. We are still in the planning stages and still in the exploratory stages of what we could do. So we're not going to give away any details yet, but we would like your feedback. We know a lot of you were able to attend our Lake and Lagoon tour, and we want to be able to extend it out to a larger group. So we're looking to do something a little on the larger side. So if you could go to retrowdw.com/survey, fill out the survey about the Epcot 35 event we're trying to do. And this would be on September 30th, 2017. So hopefully you can fill that out, and if all goes well and we can put something together, we'll definitely let everybody know and get those tickets out there as soon as possible. So Brian's going down there next week. He's going to do a little exploratory tour around Epcot for us to check out some venues, and you never know what we're going to have in store. We also have a topic picked out for next month. Hal, this is something that you chose and you'd like to go back and do because we have a special film release to go with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite attractions of all time. Mission to Mars,
Yeah.
and we'll talk a little bit about Flight to the Moon, the precursor to that. But mostly Mission to Mars, because Third Officer Collins is my personal hero.
And you may have recalled that way back in episode 2, the Tomorrowland, we touched on this briefly as we went around Tomorrowland. I think we'll all admit we really didn't know what we were doing by episode 2. We still hadn't figured out the stuff. So we are going to revisit Mission Mars and Flight to the Moon in more detail. And again, we have a very special film release that will be coming out next month to coincide with this episode. So stay tuned. That wraps it up for this month. Again, to all of our listeners, thanks for listening. If you could give us a shout out or review on iTunes, as always, you can reach us at podcast@retrowdw.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you next month. And with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro Disney World on Twitter and Instagram at RetroWDW, on Facebook at Retro Disney World. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, you can find our producer, Jason Bartel from Deepwater Studios, at JasonDWS, our announcer, Andre Gardner, at Andre Gardner, and follow our hosts, Hal Bowers, at GoAwayGreen, for JT Kushner, at LS1JT, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook, at Brian P. Miles.